I grabbed my phone and stared at the number one more time. 42 million. The Wells Fargo executive had just confirmed that my family's commercial properties in downtown Portland had sold for exactly 42 million, nearly double what the initial appraisal suggested. At 63 years old, after 40 years of managing those buildings, my father left me. I was finally free. My hands were shaking as I drove home to our house in Lake Oswego. My wife deserved to hear this news first. We'd been married for 38 years, and she'd stood by me through everything. The lean years when tenants defaulted, the 2008 crisis that nearly bankrupted us, the endless nights of bookkeeping and repairs. This was our moment, our reward. I pulled into the driveway at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, earlier than usual. My wife, silver Lexus, was parked in its spot, which surprised me. She'd mentioned something about a charity luncheon that usually ran until 40 odored. I figured she must have come home early. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, my heart pounding with excitement. I wanted to see her face when I told her. I wanted to hold her and plan our retirement together. Maybe that villa in Tuscany she'd always dreamed about, or the sailboat I'd had my eye on. That's when I heard voices from upstairs, my wife's laugh, then a man's voice, low and intimate, a voice I recognized immediately. Richard Harrison, my business attorney for the past 15 years, the man who just brokered the sale of my properties, the man who'd been at our dinner table countless times, the man whose kids had played with our grandchildren. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. Part of me wanted to storm up there to confront them both, but something held me back. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was 40 years of learning to think before acting in business. Or maybe it was the cold calculation that was already forming in my mind. I backed out of the house silently, got in my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. By the time the sun started setting over the Wamut River, I'd parked at a viewpoint and spent 3 hours thinking. The initial shock had given way to a strange clarity. I replayed everything in my mind, not just what I'd heard today, but years of small moments I dismissed or ignored. The late-night conference calls with Richard that my wife sometimes joined. The weekend charity events that Richard also attended. The way they'd laugh at inside jokes I didn't understand. The trips my wife took to San Francisco to visit her sister. Trips that coincidentally aligned with Richard's court cases there. How long had this been going on? Months, years. And then another thought struck me, cold and sharp. Richard had handled all the legal paperwork for the property sale. He knew every detail of the transaction. He'd been the one to suggest putting the proceeds temporarily in a business account for tax purposes. He'd been the one to recommend a specific accounting firm to handle the capital gains calculations. My stomach turned. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger. I went home around midnight. My wife was in bed reading a magazine. She looked up when I entered, her expression casual and innocent. "You're home late," she said. "Where were you?" "Long day at the office," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Had to finish up some paperwork on the sale?" "Oh, right. How did that go?" She asked it so casually, as if she didn't already know, as if Richard hadn't already told her. "It went through," I said. 42 million. We're set for life." Her eyes widened. Genuine surprise. Or excellent acting. "That's wonderful. We should celebrate." "We will. I promise soon." I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while my wife slept peacefully beside me. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. How do you share a bed with someone who's been betraying you? How do you pretend everything is normal when your entire world has just shattered? But I had to pretend because I needed time to figure out exactly what was happening. The next morning, I called an old friend from my Navy days, Tom Garrett, who'd gone on to become a private investigator after his military service. We met at a diner in Beaverton, far from anywhere my wife or Richard might see us. "I need you to look into something for me," I told Tom, sliding a folder across the table. "My attorney, Richard Harrison. I need to know everything about his finances, his movements, his communications if you can get them. And my wife, I need to know where she goes, who she meets, everything." Tom looked at the folder, then at me. He'd known me for 40 years. He knew I wasn't the paranoid type. "How deep do you want me to dig?" he asked quietly. "As deep as it goes," I said. While Tom worked on his investigation, I started my own. I spent the next 2 weeks going through every file, every document, every piece of paperwork related to the property sale. I told my wife I was organizing our financial records for the accountant. What I found made my blood run cold. Richard had structured the sale through a complex series of LLCs and trusts. On the surface, everything looked legitimate, but when I dug deeper, I found accounts I'd never authorized, transfer agreements I'd never seen, a consulting fee of $1 million paid to a company called Harrison Associates, Richard's personal firm that I'd never agreed to. There were other irregularities, too. The escrow account where the proceeds were being held wasn't with the title company I'd specified. It was with a different firm, one where Richard served on the board. The accounting firm he'd recommended had made several estimated tax payments on my behalf to the IRS. But when I called the IRS directly, they had no record of receiving them. Someone was stealing from me systematically, carefully, and they'd been planning it for a long time. Tom's report arrived 2 weeks later, delivered in person at the same diner. "You're not going to like this," he said, opening a thick manila envelope. The photographs came first. My wife and Richard at restaurants, entering hotel rooms on a beach in Maui, a trip she'd told me was a wellness retreat with college friends. The metadata on the photos showed they'd been seeing each other for at least 3 years. But that wasn't the worst part. "There's more," Tom said, pulling out bank statements. "Richard and your wife opened a joint account 18 months ago. They've been moving money into it gradually. Looks like they've been skimming from your business accounts for over a year. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. There's currently $3.7 million in that account." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "And this," Tom continued, sliding over another document. "I found a property deed. Richard purchased a condo in Vancouver last year. Cash payment $4 million. It's registered under an LLC, but I traced it back to him. Want to guess who else has a key? I didn't need to guess." "There's one more thing," Tom said, his voice grim. "I pulled Richard's phone records. Don't ask me how. He's been in regular contact with your wife, obviously. But there's another number that keeps showing up. An attorney in the Cayman Islands. I did some digging. That attorney specializes in offshore asset protection and, well, helping people disappear with their money." The picture became crystal clear. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to rob me blind and vanish together. The property sale was supposed to be their big score. They'd skim off the top, hide the money offshore, and probably leave me holding the bag for whatever legal and tax problems they'd created. How long had they been planning this? Since before the sale was even on the table. Had Richard been the one to suggest selling the properties in the first place? I tried to remember. Yes, he had. He'd called it smart estate planning. I sat in that diner booth for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across the table. I thought about confronting them, about screaming and throwing things and demanding answers. But what good would that do? They'd deny everything. They'd hide the evidence. They'd probably accelerate their timeline and disappear faster. No, I needed to be smarter than that. "Tom," I said quietly, "I need you to do something else for me. I need you to document everything, every transaction, every meeting, every movement. I need a timeline of their entire relationship and every dollar they've stolen." "Can you do that?" "Already started," Tom said. "But what are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to make sure they pay for what they've done." The next morning, I called an old colleague I hadn't spoken to in years, Patricia Chen, a forensic accountant I'd worked with during a complex audit back in the 90s. She'd since built a reputation as one of the best in the Pacific Northwest at unraveling financial fraud. I met her at her office in downtown Portland and laid everything out: the sale documents, the questionable transfers, Tom's findings about the offshore attorney. Patricia studied the documents for nearly an hour, making notes, cross-referencing bank statements. Finally, she looked up at me, her expression serious. "This is textbook embezzlement," she said, "and it's sophisticated. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing, but they also got greedy. See here," she pointed to a series of transfers. "They moved too much too fast after the sale closed. If they'd been patient and spread it out over years, it would have been nearly impossible to detect. But this leaves a trail. Can you trace it? I asked. Oh, I can do more than that, Patricia said. I can build a case that will stand up in both civil and criminal court. But I'm going to need access to all your accounts, and I'll need you to not let on that you know what's happening. Can you do that? I've been doing it for 3 weeks, I told her. For the next month, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the devoted husband, celebrating our windfall with my wife, talking about retirement plans and travel. At night, after she fell asleep, I worked with Patricia and Tom, building our case piece by piece. Patricia discovered that Richard had created 7 different shell companies, all designed to siphon money from the property sale. The consulting fee to Harrison Associates was just the beginning. There were legal review fees, transaction coordination fees, document preparation fees, all going to companies Richard controlled. In total, he'd already stolen $68 million from the sale proceeds. But the smoking gun came from Tom's surveillance. He tracked Richard to a meeting with the Cayman Islands attorney at a hotel near PDX Airport. Tom had managed to get audio from the lobby, not admissible in court, but enough to confirm what we suspected. They were planning to move a $15 million offshore within the next 2 weeks, then file for divorce on my wife's behalf, claiming she was entitled to half of everything in the settlement. The scheme was elegant, really. They'd hide most of the money offshore where I couldn't touch it. Then in the divorce, my wife would get her half of what was left, which would actually be most of the total money since they'd already hidden the bulk of it. Richard would retire from his practice, meet my wife in Vancouver, or wherever they'd planned to go, and they'd live happily ever after on my life's work over my body. I had a choice to make. I could go to the police immediately with what we had, but white-collar investigations take time. Richard was an attorney. He'd know how to stall, how to move money faster, how to cover tracks. If I tipped my hand too soon, they might escape with at least some of the money. Or I could wait. Let them think they were getting away with it. Let them make one more mistake. I chose to wait. The breaking point came on a Friday evening, exactly 6 weeks after I'd first discovered them together. My wife announced she was going to Seattle for the weekend for a reunion with her book club friends. That sounds nice, I said, smiling. Tell the girls I said hello. Tom had already confirmed that Richard had booked a suite at the Four Seasons in Seattle. Same hotel, same dates. While my wife packed her bag, I made a phone call to the FBI's white-collar crime division. I'd been in contact with Agent Sarah Morrison for the past 2 weeks, feeding her information through Patricia. Sarah had been building a case, waiting for the right moment. They're moving the money this weekend, I told her. Tomorrow morning, Richard has an 11 a.m. appointment with his offshore attorney via video conference from his hotel room. That's when they'll initiate the final transfers. We'll be ready, Sarah said. That Saturday morning, I drove to Seattle. I parked across the street from the Four Seasons and watched. At 47 a.m., I saw my wife enter the hotel. She looked beautiful, wearing a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She was smiling. At 11:15 a.m., FBI agents entered the hotel. Tom had given me a radio tuned to their frequency. I listened as they knocked on room 1847. I heard Richard's voice, confused and angry. I heard my wife crying. By 11:30 a.m., they were both in custody. The next 3 months were a blur of depositions, court hearings, and legal proceedings. Patricia's financial analysis was damning. Tom's surveillance provided context. The FBI's investigation uncovered even more. Richard had done this before to 2 other clients, though on a smaller scale. This had been his retirement plan. My wife tried to claim she didn't know about the financial fraud. That lasted until prosecutors showed her the joint account statements with her signature authorizing transfers. She tried to claim Richard had manipulated her. That lasted until they played recordings of her discussing the offshore accounts. In the end, Richard was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. His law license was revoked. His assets were seized, including that Vancouver condo, which sold for $6 million. That money went back to me. My wife pleaded guilty to conspiracy and received 7 years. Our divorce was finalized while she was awaiting sentencing. She got nothing. Not a dollar, not a piece of furniture, nothing. Adultery combined with fraud meant she'd violated our prenuptial agreement in every possible way. I recovered 38. 4 million of the original 42 million. The rest was gone, spent on their hotels, trips, and the various legal fees Richard had charged me to help him steal from me. But I had enough, more than enough. My son and daughter, who'd been devastated by the whole ordeal, helped me figure out what to do next. We could have just kept the money, invested it, lived well. But that felt empty. My father had built those properties to provide for our family and our community. They deserved better than to be the spoils of a con. We established the Thomas Morrison Foundation, named after my father. Its mission is to provide legal aid and financial counseling to victims of fraud and financial abuse, particularly seniors who get taken advantage of by people they trust. We also fund small business development in low-income neighborhoods, giving people the kind of opportunities my father had when he started buying property in Portland in the 1962 seconds. The foundation now operates 3 legal clinics, has helped over 200 families recover from financial fraud, and has made microloans to 47 small businesses. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about making something good come from something terrible. I visit the foundation office most mornings now. I'm 71 years old, and this work gives me purpose. I meet people who've been swindled by contractors, by their own family members, by financial advisors who were supposed to help them. I see my own story reflected in theirs, and I do everything I can to help them get justice the way I did. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying in the marriage for so long, if I regret trusting Richard, if I regret not seeing the signs earlier. The truth is, I do regret those things. But I've learned that betrayal isn't your fault. You can't go through life suspecting everyone, double-checking everything, assuming the worst. That's no way to live. What you can do is be smart when betrayal happens. Document everything. Get professional help. Don't act out of anger or hurt. Build your case carefully and thoroughly. And when the time is right, make sure justice is served. My son asked me recently if I'd ever date again. Maybe remarry. I laughed. At 71, after everything I've been through, I'm not looking for romance. I'm looking for peace. And I found it in the work I do, in the people I help, in knowing that my father's legacy is being honored in a way he would have been proud of. Last month, I received a letter from my ex-wife. She's up for parole review next year and wanted to apologize. The letter was 3 pages long, full of explanations and justifications and requests for forgiveness. I read it once, then put it in my filing cabinet. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive her, but that day isn't today. Richard, I learned, tried to hang himself in prison last year. He survived, but barely. Some people might say that's karma. I don't know what I believe about karma. I just know that actions have consequences. He made his choices. He's living with them now. As for me, I wake up every morning in a smaller house than the one I shared with my wife. I make my own coffee, read the newspaper on my tablet, and head to the foundation office by 9C Odred. I have lunch with my son on Tuesdays and dinner with my daughter and her family on Sundays. I play golf on Fridays with Tom, who's retired now too. It's a good life, a simple life, and it's honest. That's worth more than 42 million. That's worth more than the 38 years I spent with someone who didn't love me the way I loved her. That's worth everything. People sometimes tell me I'm lucky that I was smart enough and wealthy enough to fight back, to get justice. They're right. Not everyone has those resources. That's exactly why the foundation exists, because everyone deserves justice, whether they have 42 million or 42. The woman I loved betrayed me in the worst way possible. The man I trusted stole from me systematically and without remorse. They tried to take everything, my money, my dignity, my future. But they failed because in the end, I took something they can never get back. I took their freedom. I took their reputations. I took their future together. And I turned their betrayal into something that helps people, something that matters, something that lasts. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice, I've learned, is the best revenge there